The building collapsed to dust.
Explosive energy creates hot dust clouds rising like a volcanic eruption.
It was kind of a reddish brown, and it more or less ran east and west. It was a long, thin building, but it had been damaged and it had been on fire for hours, and the smoke just seemed to intensify. But we really couldn't see a lot of damage from this angle, from the north side of the structures. That's why everybody was so surprised when all of a sudden it just fell.
Now, the other thing, Doug, we presume it has been burning for some time. As you indicated, there was nobody inside, and we hope no danger to anybody when it went down.
Well, that's the thing, is that when number 2 went down, I don't think...
The U.S. Geological Survey website provides us with a definition of a pyroclastic flow as a ground-hugging avalanche of hot gas and debris.
Huge buildings that have been here so long would actually just fall, and that's what happened. They just crumbled.
The rising gas chimney is clearly visible in this photo of the North Tower implosion with pyroclastic flows between buildings. The cauliflower shape of the debris clouds is a telltale sign of pyroclastic flows generated by massive explosions typical of volcanic eruptions and controlled demolitions.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Ben. That is the second building that has gone down. It came out like a plume of smoke, like a banana unpeeling, plumes of smoke coming out, and then absolutely nothing. And now where there were two huge buildings, two huge towers, there is now nothing.
A pyroclastic surge can even flow over water as hot gases carry dust created by explosive energy. Here, the South Tower implosion creates a pyroclastic surge moving out over the Hudson River.
The World Trade Center has just crumbled, collapsed in a pile of dust. This approximately less than an hour after it was hit by an aircraft.
The second building completely down.
People starting to run away from the scene, and I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself, and another big, huge plume of gray and white smoke shooting up into the air, and then more of the smoke billowing up the street here.
Once again, our definition of a pyroclastic flow. Hot gases carrying dust and debris flow along the ground with a fluid motion. It requires explosive energy to generate the necessary heat, dust, and debris. Turbulence and fluidization of debris are characteristic.
If there is an elephant in the room, you don't need a magnifying glass to find it. As any seasoned September 11th truth-aware individual will tell you, there is a conspiracy and a cover-up surrounding the events of September 11th, and you don't need to be a Sherlock Holmes to see it. Like the elephant in the closet, all one needs to do to see the government complicity in the attacks on America is break away from the Zionist-controlled mainstream media and look at the gargantuan amount of evidence. Evidence so abundant that most September 11th truth websites have had to specialize on just a few exhibits of that evidence. Those in the media who have seen the evidence, all of them, and continue to suppress the evidence, while making little or no attempt to inform their audience that the official story is a lie, should not be considered anything except traitors to the United States of America. Furthermore, no excuse should be made for these traitors, because Americans are dying in the Middle East, and no excuse for the media's treason can possibly be justifiable. No job security or any other excuse is reasonable to sell out the United States and allow tens of thousands of Americans, Palestinians, Iraqis, Lebanese, and Israelis to be slaughtered. Those in the media who publicly state that they have seen the September 11th truth documentaries and have seen the evidence that propels the September 11th truth movement then report or discuss September 11th or anything related to September 11th and fail to acknowledge the evidence of government complicity should not be considered anything except traitors to the United States of America. Before we go any further, it is critical that you understand some history. History that Zionists want to keep from you and will even lie to you for the cause. You remember what the cause is, don't you? Our destiny is to rule over the inferior races. Our earthly kingdom will be ruled by our leader with a rod of iron. The masses will lick our feet and serve us as our slaves. Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. Ariel Sharon, his fanatical Zionist supporters in Israel refer to him as Arab King, but the Arabs know him as a lifelong butcher, terrorist, and war criminal. There was a time when Sharon was disgraced and his political career seemed to be over. The isolation of Ariel Sharon was the result of a 1982 Palestinian massacre which Sharon engineered when he was Israel's defense minister. It was the Israelis themselves who forced Sharon to resign. Sharon's troops blocked the exits from the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps, while a Lebanese militia, allied with the Israeli military, went into the camps and slaughtered more than 1,500 unarmed Palestinian civilians, while raping many women. Though these Lebanese militias were the ones who did the actual killing, it was Ariel Sharon who controlled the militias, and it was Sharon's soldiers who stood by and blocked the camp exits, deliberately allowing the slaughter to take place. A survivor of the attack who had been raped and shot went to Belgium and initiated a war crimes case against Sharon. Several Lebanese militia leaders were summoned to testify against Sharon. Shortly before their testimony, 3 of them were suddenly killed by unknown gunmen and car bombs. Mossad anyone. In 1955, a false flag operations was exposed for the world to see. Israeli agents, impersonating Arab terrorists, were caught staging a series of bombings against American installations in Egypt. When this conspiracy was exposed, it ultimately created such a controversy that it brought down the Israeli government. The long-since forgotten scandal became known as the Laban Affair. USS Liberty naval communications ship attacked by unmarked Israeli jets and torpedo boats over a 7-hour period with the US flag flying high. The reason, of course, was to sink the ship, kill all of the Americans on board, then leave Egypt to take the blame. If it was an accident, it was the best planned accident I'd ever heard of. USS Liberty survivor. Cover-up alleged in probe of USS Liberty. A former Navy attorney who helped lead the military investigation of the 1967 Israeli attack on the USS Liberty that killed 34 American servicemen says former President Lyndon Johnson and his defense secretary, Robert McNamara, ordered that the inquiry conclude the incident was an accident. In a signed affidavit released at a Capitol Hill news conference, retired Captain Lord Boston said Johnson and McNamara told those heading the Navy's inquiry to conclude that the attack was a case of mistaken identity despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Israeli pilot admits USS Liberty was intentional. 15 years after the attack, an Israeli pilot approached Liberty survivors and then held extensive interviews with former Congressman Paul and Pete McCloskey about his role. According to this senior Israeli lead pilot, he recognized the Liberty as American immediately, so he informed his headquarters and was told to ignore the American flag and continue his attack. He refused to do so and returned to base, where he was arrested. Later, a dual-citizen Israeli major told survivors that he was in an Israeli war room, where he heard that pilot's radio report. The attacking pilots and everyone in the Israeli war room knew that they were attacking an American ship, the major said. He recanted the statement only after he received threatening phone calls from Israel. The pilots' protests also were heard by radio monitors in the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon. Then U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon Dwight Porter has confirmed this. Porter told his story to syndicated columnists Roland Evans and Robert Novick and offered to submit to further questioning by authorities. Unfortunately, no one in the U.S. government has any interest in hearing these first-person accounts of Israeli treachery. Israel attacked the USS Liberty using unmarked aircraft. This is the single fact which proves Israel knew exactly who they were attacking. Israel's story is that they thought the USS Liberty was an Egyptian ship and therefore a legitimate target of war. Were that true, there would be no reason to attack a supposedly Egyptian ship with unmarked aircraft. The only possible reason to use unmarked aircraft to attack the ship is that Israel knew it was an American ship and intended to sink it, then to blame the attack on Egypt. Mueller, who, as top legal counsel to the official investigation, is in a position to know, agrees that Israel intended to sink the USS Liberty and blame Egypt for it, thus dragging the United States into a war on Israel's behalf. This seems to be a common trick of Israel. Starting with the Laban Affair, through the USS Liberty, to the fake radio transmitter that tricked Reagan into attacking Libya, to potentially September 11th itself, Israel's game is to frame Arabs and set them up as targets for the United States. The official U.S. investigation is discredited, and with it, every claim of innocence for Israel that relied on the official investigation as a source. The real question facing the American people is why the U.S. government seems more concerned with protecting Israel after they are caught playing these dirty tricks, rather than doing something to convince Israel not to kill any more Americans. More